This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
All righty, welcome to episode 16 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we have former WFAN radio host Craig Carton joining us as he gets set to start a second season of the Carton Show on FS1. Craig, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. Have you gotten used to the fact that you are a former WFAN radio host yet?
It sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. People ask me a lot about, how much do I miss FAN? And obviously, that's where I made the biggest name for myself. I don't think I'm really going to miss it until we get into football season. We would have taken so many vacation days in July and August anyway. Plus the Yankees stink, the Mets stink. It would have all been waiting for football to start.
Right.
And well, yeah, certainly there've been a lot of, topics to talk about, mostly, jet related because of Aaron Rodgers. But I think I'll feel something. I hope I do. Once we get into mid-September and the football season's cranking out. So I'm not there yet, but we'll see. We'll see.
So we all found out about your departure in June when Andrew Marchand of the New York Post reported that you were leaving FAN to focus on your FS1 show. But when did you make that decision?
I mean, not much before that. I took the better part of 9 months without a contract trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I just, very, very lucky that both WFAN and Fox were respectful of that it wasn't an easy, it's a TV offer, I'm leaving, or, I'm staying at the Fan. It was a difficult decision and had much more to do with just quality of life.
Right.
And the ability to be home and with my kids and all that stuff than it did anything else. And it wasn't the easiest decision because, at FAN, I treat that like hallowed ground. Afternoon drive, WFAN, because, you have a connection to the radio station, obviously going back about a decade now. So it wasn't like, oh, here comes the shiny new toy, I'm going to go for it. It took me the better part of 9 months to figure out what was ultimately best, not for me, but really for my family.
So when you signed on to do the Carton Show last year, so that was TV from 7 to 9:30 in the morning, and then you were doing radio from 2 to 6 on FAN. Did you think that you were going to be able to maintain that schedule, or did you know from the start that something was going to have to give?
No, I think you go into those things thinking at least I can do both. I'll figure it out. Like, I'm not a big sleep guy anyway. So it wasn't like I went from getting 8 hours of sleep a night to, oh my God, I'm only getting 2. But over the course of time, I think I had to give a little bit on both jobs where I couldn't do both jobs the way I wanted to, whether that meant, staying awake for a Yankee game, making sure I watched everything I had to watch to be true to FAN and the FAN audience. And then if I'm doing that, I'm not getting the sleep I need to be wide awake, to do the national show on FS1. So while I think physically I could have done both for a very long time, I think emotionally, mentally, and I'll go back to family, it just, it wasn't going to work because both audiences, deserve you at your best. And both companies deserve you at your best. And that played a role in the decision.
Are you satisfied with the way the TV show has grown after 1 year?
Yeah. We started together not knowing who was a part of the show. And it was brand new for me as much as it was for, I think, FS1 and everybody involved. And I think if you look at the show that we did today, for example, compared to our show a year ago, I think we've made great strides and steps in the content we produce and deliver. And I think you have to remember, even today as we sit here doing this, I haven't been doing it for a full year yet. And much like radio, TV is habitual. And you got to, let people know you exist and then give them a reason to keep coming back. And I think we've done a really good job of doing that.
Are you satisfied with the way the TV show has been received after 1 year? Like, do you put much stock into social media reaction?
I put some stock in it, recognizing that, the majority of everything on social media is negative.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. Like, I got the most listened to show, an afternoon drive in New York. But if I go to social media, half the people hate me. So I take it with a grain of salt. I think it's more important that I know I'm getting the eyeballs. I know people are checking it out, and that's a tangible thing. And for me, I've always said, I always believe in myself. And I think the more people check it out, they'll figure it out because it's different than what most shows do. And once people figure it out, much like in radio, then I think they become viewers for life. And I think we're starting that transition now.
So do you think that half the people on social media, it seems like half the people hate you? Does that criticism happen if you never got arrested? Like, does that make you an easy target, or would those critics be there no matter what?
Well, I mean, so it's a bit of a loaded question. I think the critics are there no matter what. I think what I did was I gave them a much easier target to hit. Prior to getting in trouble and being arrested and all that, you could say you don't like me, but you couldn't dispute my success, right? Now you can say, oh, I can point to something tangible. This is why I don't like that guy.
Right.
So obviously, being a knucklehead and going down the road I went down, I think just makes it easier for people that didn't like me to begin with, or were looking for a reason, maybe to have, to take a shot. I certainly gave them an ample target on my backside.
Do you spend more time on your personal Twitter account or your burner account?
I do not have a burner account. No,
I don't know. I feel like I found one.
I can tell you as a fact, I've never had a burner account. I have a tough enough time putting out like 2 tweets a week, let alone the time it would take to have a burner account.
It seems like most national sports TV shows are almost built for social media now. Like ESPN and Fox Sports, they love to take a 1 or 2 minute clip of something that a host says that they know will generate a reaction, and they put it on social media. Are you comfortable with those clips being shared for essentially the sole purpose of generating social media reaction, a lot of which is going to be negative?
Well, look, I think all of us in media, including awful announcing, live in a world where you're trying to get people to digest your content. Long form content is very limited in its success. So it's quick 30-second bites or a one-line thing. I think you guys do the same thing.
Yep.
I think we all kind of do the same thing, where not that we're fighting each other for clicks and views or saying or doing things solely to get them, but the radio station, the TV station, awful announcing, you name it, also understands the value of interaction and social media. So I can tell you that our show, for example, last year on TikTok had over 100 million views of our videos. I assume that's pretty good. I assume that you can monetize that. And it's rewarding to know that, there are clips that get put out there, and there are people that I know will never watch the show live, but will always consume whatever it is that we put out digitally. Right. And I think that's just the direction, that media is going in. Without that, I'm not sure if you can be successful anymore.
So a couple of weeks ago, the Carton Show put out a clip of you saying the Jets don't know how to close out football games after they lost the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah.
I think WFAN listeners would see that and understand it was said in jest. I think people who don't know you, however, take it literally.
Yeah.
Does it bother you that the national TV audience doesn't quite get your shtick like the local radio audience does?
No, listen, I recognize that there are people who never heard me once on the radio. So it's going to take those people time to figure out what I do and how I do it in this context, right, to everything that we do. So from that standpoint, look, none of this stuff bothers me.
Yeah.
You have to be thick-skinned. If I was worrying about what some random guy I'll never meet says, as a criticism of the show I do, then I can't do the show. So I'm not bothered by it at all. I just think there's context to everything.
On radio, ratings were always a big deal for you. Wanting to beat ESPN and finish number one was a big deal. You would talk about it on air. Do you pay the same amount of attention to ratings with your TV show?
I mean, I have a general sense of what the audience is, of what downloads are and views on social media. I'm not a slave to it as much as I was on radio, because radio is it's different in that it's me versus someone, right? In New York, it was, at least in afternoons, it was Evan Roberts and I against the Michael Kay show, head to head. That's how we were going to be judged and compared. When I did mornings, it was Boomer and Carton versus, pick a radio station, right? I think this is different in that who am I fighting against, right? Who's the quote unquote enemy? And I think it's different in that regard.
Is Cody Decker still going to be on the show? I know he just launched the radio show with Michelle Beadle on Mad Dog's Sirius XM channel.
Yeah, Cody, I believe is working at Sirius now, and has, as you just said, that new show, and I think that's where his future is going to be. He's a great friend, was great with us, and obviously wish him the very best. He's a dear, dear friend.
So is your TV show still going to be like a rotating cast of guests?
You're gonna have to wait till next week to find out.
There
are great plans, though. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So the midday radio hours are, I think it was, I was curious if Cody was going to be doing both or not, just because the midday radio hours are a little bit more, I think, conducive to having a morning TV show and a midday radio show. So like, I think you would have been able to pull it off schedule wise. Obviously that's not, sounds like that's not going to happen. Would you be interested in adding a late morning or midday radio show to your schedule? Is that something that would appeal to you at some point?
I mean, I'm very happy where I'm at right now, and my plate's full, and my focus is really laser focused on being the best TV host I can be with FS1, and that's where all my energy is. So right now in the moment, that's the only thing I want to do, and the only thing I'm looking to do.
Was that option ever discussed with WFAN, moving you to in the course of those 9 months when you were trying to figure everything out, moving you to a time slot that might make it a little bit easier to do both, or was exclusivity a big deal for Fox?
It was more about my lifestyle and how I wanted to spend my day and the amount of time I have to put in to being really good at what I do. So it was never about, well, what if we move you here? What if we move you there? It was about what job is the best for me at this moment in my life. And that's why I chose to be here.
Do you think that being exclusive to Fox now will help the TV show grow a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. My audience that loves me on radio, if they want to hear what I have to say about sports, only has one place now to find me. So I think that'll help the growth of the show. And just having my sole focus be on FS1, I think long-term will be very beneficial as well.
You've always kind of portrayed yourself as a radio guy at heart. And I think for people that truly love radio, the platform is just different.
Yeah.
Can you love TV as much as you love radio?
Yeah, I love getting up in the morning. I love interacting with the guys that we have, on the network. I love, having an opinion on things just outside of New York and bringing my brand of what I hope is entertaining sports content to a national audience. It was always a goal of mine to do that. So yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm excited. I'm pumped. I'm rejuvenated. I'm well rested. And I'm really excited about this fall. I think we're going to do great things, not just on our show, on the network. The support we've gotten from Fox has been amazing. And I'm really excited about the new look that we have coming this fall. It's going to be exciting.
Do you think you're as good of a TV host as you are a radio host?
I sure as hell hope so. Yeah, it's a different animal, as you said. I'm not taking phone calls, not interacting with, random everyday people that you can on the radio. But the sensibility of how to entertain, I don't think it changes. Yeah. You can either entertain people or you can't. And I believe that I can and always have.
Do you think, is there any sense of like that it's, or feeling of that it's wasted talent by not being on radio anymore?
No, I was on radio for over 30 years and I was really good at it. And this is a new challenge and it's going to take all of my talent, to make it successful. And I have the firm belief and confidence that with the great support group we have and the other guys that will be on the show with me, that it's going to be successful. And it's been a great first year for me. The experience has been awesome. I've been loving it.
So I think like your TV show, it feels like and I think this is TV in general. It feels like I'm watching a performance, and your radio show more so. It felt like I was in the room and you were talking to me. I wasn't just part of the audience, and I don't think you could necessarily build that on TV. It's harder for TV to be consumed in the background the way radio can. It's harder to have the casual conversations that you do on radio. TV, everything is built more for a reaction. It's a little bit harder to be as personable. That's kind of the nature of TV, and it almost ignores part of what made you really good at radio.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. I would just say that, TV and radio are different, obviously, and the connection to the audience is different, but you're a performer at heart, whether it's TV, radio, I don't know, movies, books, whatever it is, and you have your voice has a point of view. And I think TV allows you, especially over the course of 2.5 hours every day, to express that point of view. I usually approach it, always have, trying to be entertaining and not being, the serious guy in the room. And my gut is that plays well, regardless of the medium. You can either entertain people or you can't. And I always have.
Could you ever foresee making your TV show a simulcast on radio?
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that's been discussed.
When you returned to WFAN 3 years ago,
mm-hmm.
Could you have foreseen walking away on your own terms this soon? And is there even like a sense of accomplishment that you were able to walk away on your own after the way things ended previously the first time in 2017?
No, my sense of accomplishment was coming back, to WFAN and having that opportunity. And that'll always stand out to me with great pride, that although my wounds are all self-inflicted, I was away from radio for 3 years, which is a very long time. And to come back to WFAN in a different time slot with different people and have the level of success that we had, that's the thing that I'm really proud of. I never thought about anything beyond just hoping, to have the chance to come back and earn a living doing what I love to do. Anything beyond that is obviously gravy. And I will never forget the opportunity, that FAN gave me and the success that we had together. It's been great. It was great.
How was working with Evan Roberts?
Great. He's a very unique guy. What I love about Evan is that he is maybe the most honest person, I've ever worked with. He is what he is. He makes no apologies for who he is. And I think that comes through really well on the radio. And Evan Roberts also had to take a leap of faith that he and I could work together. He had built a 15-year career at FAN. I think is beloved by the audience, is probably the most knowledgeable sports guy in the building, including me and everybody else there. And he was able to evolve, I think, to show off, the personal side of Evan Roberts. And I think he did that really, really well. And I think career-wise, that plays well for him long-term, that he was able to adapt, evolve, and grow, and I think become an even better broadcaster. And my gut is that when you're long gone from awful announcing, whenever that is, and I'm sure they love you, Evan Roberts will still be on FAN.
Were you confident that he was the right fit as a co-host when you started the afternoon show with him?
Yeah, I never had any doubt. And part of that's probably a level of my own ego that I think highly of myself as a radio broadcaster, where no matter who you sat next to me, I'd find a way to make it work. The good part of working with Evan is that he's a pro. So it wasn't like I had to make it work. The day I showed up, he was all in, whatever it took for us collectively to be successful. And you don't always get that. I've worked with Boomer. I worked with, different people in New Jersey, and throughout my radio career, I've been blessed to have a lot of great success. But the success that Evan and I had is every bit as much to do with him as it is me.
Was there a moment where it felt like the show started to click? Was like, is there something that happens on air? Is it more so just seeing that the ratings are successful?
Mike, I think, to be fair, I think most shows take a good year, even a year and a half to gel, to get into a sweet spot. And if you're not there, 12 to 18 months, I don't know that you ever get there, to be fair about it. And I don't have a specific show in mind, but I think we started in November, right, of 2020. In the spring of 21, we started doing FSU Fridays. And Evan was all in on it. And he produced more content than I did for FSU Friday. And it was at that moment, looking back on it with some clarity, that I think I felt like he gets it, he's all in, and he's willing to play. And I think doing things like that, and then, Wag Wednesday and milk baths and all that stuff, he was always all in. And I think that's what ultimately made us successful.
How do you think Evan and Tiki Barber will do together? Obviously, Tiki is a very different radio personality from yourself. Have you listened to that show at all?
Yeah, whenever I'm in the car, I have it on. Obviously, I don't get to listen every day or for that long every day. I think they'll be great. I think like any new tandem, it's going to take some time, like I just said, for them to find their sweet spot. But listen, Evan's done it a long time, and Tiki's now done it for more than a decade, both nationally and locally on FAN. And I think if people can just take a breath and give them a chance, I think they're going to be very successful. And I'd be surprised if they weren't. But you got to let shows breathe a little bit. You got to figure out the roles, and there's a third voice, and what does this guy do? What does that guy do? And as much as you can sit in a room and you can have all the greatest plans for this is what the show is, that show will sound wildly different a year in, 2 years in, than it sounds today. And I think they're going to have a long run of success.
Do you take pride in seeing personalities kind of develop at WFAN? Like, you think like when Tommy Lugauer started producing the afternoon show, and now he's a big part on that afternoon show. Even Jerry Recco in mornings, and Al Dukes' personality, kind of letting those personalities shine. Chris McMonagle, even just the fact that now he went on from the afternoon show and he's hosting overnights. Do you take pride in seeing people develop their kind of as from being part of your show and becoming bigger parts of other shows?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that. I take great pride in it. I think, when people talk about my career at FAN off air, I think you experienced this at a different level during Fantasy Phenom when we were trying guys out to potentially become hosts. I've always tried to pay it forward. I've always tried to be the guy in the room, no matter how successful I was, that had an open door, that gave other guys opportunities. Like, as much as obviously you need to have an ego and think highly of yourself to do what we do, I was never afraid of new talent coming in.
Right.
I always thought that would be the lifeline of the bloodline of a station's developing talent. So if you look back on my career, going back to 2007, like creating the warm-up show, for Alan Jerry, giving everyone in the room a microphone and a voice, with no rules, open microphone, use it. Seeing McMonagle get the overnight show, seeing Tommy develop into what I think is a great producer and a developing really good on-air talent. And the opportunities that, whether it's through me and Boomer and me and Evan, that we were able to create for younger guys, I'm very proud of that. And when I see those guys, on the air now with regularity and excelling, I'm not going to lie to you. I feel really good about it because I know I had a hand in it. And I feel good that those guys took this amazing opportunity and have, used it for good. They're going to have long-time careers because we gave them an open microphone. And I think that's one of my legacies at FAN is being the guy that you could come and I'd sit and listen to your tape and give you whatever advice I could give you. Whether you took it or not was on you. But I really feel that, when people talk about me off the air, for anything you want to say about how I do a radio show or a TV show, I think a lot of people would step forward and say, he was a good guy to me. He listened to me. He listened to my tapes. He gave me advice. He helped me in my career. And that's frankly the nicest thing people could say. But I do think people would say it if asked.
I'm sure you're still rooting for the afternoon show to do well. You've talked about how appreciative you are of WFAN giving you the second chance, but would you like to see their ratings dip just a little bit? Like would it bother you if the ratings for Evan and Tiki did better than when you were there?
No, those guys are friends. I want them to do well. I'm not competing against them. I want them to have success because I know what comes with failure. If the show doesn't do well, they're looking for a new show. And I wouldn't want that for my friends. And, I have different, obviously, levels of relationships with all the different guys there. I love WFAN. Growing up listening to it when it first started, being an intern there back in 1988, doing the morning show, doing the afternoon show. I root for fan to do well. And I'm a listener now. I want to be entertained driving home like everybody else. So I want those shows to be successful. I think Tierney and Licata have a chance to be a great midday show. And I'm happy that those guys reach out to me to get my thoughts on the show. But I am always going to be a fan of WFAN. I'm really secure in my career, right? Really secure. You take my career dating back to 1991 through today, my career speaks for itself. It is what it is. I've had success everywhere I've gone. Number one in afternoons, number one in mornings at WFAN, only guy to ever do it. So for me not to root for other guys to be successful just doesn't make sense to me.
What if it was Mike Francesa that was paired with Evan instead of Tiki to replace?
That's a good question. I see what you're doing right there. Look, Mike and I do not like each other. We never have. We never will. If it was Mike and Evan, I would want the show to be successful.
Really?
Maybe not a success.
Right. Yeah. I think it's human nature to want it to see it. I think the gap get closed a little bit with you being gone. I feel like you would almost just want that just to, even if you don't want to admit it. I feel like part of you would have to want it just to know that they miss you a little bit.
No, listen, they miss me. I miss them. But that's not based on success or lack of success of any show there. I want the shows to do well. I hope that those shows continue the dominance over Michael Kay and those guys. And I'm rooting for them to be successful. I don't want them to fail. I don't want them to come back, even a little bit. I want them to take what we built and improve upon it. And if you told me that, a year from now, their ratings are even better, great. I'm their biggest fan.
Have you reached out to Mike since joining Fox Sports? I think he was the last WFAN employee to work there.
Let me ask you a question. When you were at FAN all those years ago, was Mike a good consultant for you or no?
I never spoke with Mike. No.
Period. Stop.
When is the last time you spoke to Mike?
I've never talked to Mike. No, I've never. He and I. The last time he and I spoke was probably when he won the Pulse of the People Award and had to accept the trophy from Boomer. And that's a long time ago.
Did you enjoy that rivalry with Mike while you were at FAN in mornings and he was there in afternoons? Was that fueling?
Yeah, I loved it. Listen, it didn't fuel me to be better at what I did. Just doing mornings at FAN was enough reason to wake up and do the best you could do. But I wanted to be, there were two goals. You want to be the most listened to show in the building, and you want to be the most listened to show in your time slot against every other radio station. And being able to achieve both those things over the 10 years Boom and I were together, is number one on my resume. It's one of the things I'm most proud of, that we inherited a show from a legend in Imus, right? Nobody wanted us to succeed inside or outside of the building. And within a year, we got to number one. and we never relinquished it. And, I have great pride in that. I'll sit and talk about that all day and night if anybody wants to listen to it, because nobody could have predicted it. And obviously it gave me this great platform to do, a lot of really good things, cool things, life experiences, and stay, in the city I love the most.
So did you miss not having that kind of internal rivalry when you were in afternoons? Because like you did get along certainly better with the morning show than when you were with the morning show and it was Mike in afternoons.
Yeah, I think, when you're at a radio station.
And I think also there was kind of the expectation that you were going to develop that rivalry with Boomer, and it just didn't really happen.
Yeah, I think people wanted Boomer and I to fight, verbally on the air. I think there were certain people that thought that'd be great radio, and that Boomer and I not getting along would be like, and by the way, it would have been must listen, right?
Yeah.
If two guys that sat next to each other for a decade suddenly turned on each other,
right,
it would have been awesome from a radio standpoint. But I think long-term health for his show, for my show, for the radio station is actually getting along, having fun with each other, promoting each other, making spot appearances on each other's show. I worked at a station in Philadelphia at WIP where the morning show and the afternoon show legitimately on and off the air hated each other. And that gets old after a while. So I'm sorry to disappoint everybody, but Boomer and I are still friends. We get along. And there was never a day when he wasn't rooting for me and I wasn't rooting for him.
And that was, of course, Spike Eskin's father that was involved in that.
That's correct. It was Howard Eskin and Angelo Cataldi.
And Spike Eskin is now the WFAN program director.
Yeah, and they were oil and water. And that, and witnessing it, firsthand, I was at WIP from 93 to 97. I had never seen that before. And there were moments when it was radio gold, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where I think listeners and viewers sometimes, like, they want to be in on the fun, right? And I think if you're getting along and interacting and busting chops in a good-natured way, I think that's the long game with the listeners. When if I hate the morning guy or vice versa, I think that also creates a divide amongst listeners, where if I've got a diehard listener who loves me to death, and I tell that listener, I hate the morning show, there's a good reason for that guy not to listen to it, because I hate it. And that goes both ways. And I just think long-term, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
How is your relationship with Boomer Esiason now?
Good.
Still good.
Yeah.
Is there camaraderie between, or even rivalries between hosts and shows at FS1, or is everybody just kind of doing their own thing there?
It's different only because you've got two shows that come from New York. You got 2 shows or 3 shows that are produced out in California. So unfortunately, we don't have the same amount of FaceTime where we're walking down the hallways, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Plus, 7 to 9:30, I'm out of the building before Nick and Chris and Kevin really even show up, for their show, which is later in the afternoon. So there's less of an interpersonal connection off air, but there's no competition on air, and everyone's very supportive of one another, at least in my experience here thus far.
Were you surprised at all by the Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp breakup? Is that something that you kind of followed at all?
I wasn't even focused on it, to be honest. And they had great success here, and we should all have that same level of success. So I wish them both well.
Does the debate show format appeal to you at all? Would you go on Undisputed if Skip ever asked you?
As a guest? Yeah, of course. I would do that. I think doing a morning show is a little different. I'm not sure if people want to wake up at 7 a.m. or on the West Coast 4 a.m. and watch 2 guys argue every day. I've also, it's a morning show, and I treat it like that. So yeah, I'm trying to do just more kind of conversational, entertaining humor about last night's game or the game tonight, that kind of stuff. If asked to do it, I could do it. It's not something I don't think I'd want to do every day, where you go into work every day and you and your best friend are arguing about sports. Yeah.
Have you ever spoken or met with Skip?
Not yet. No.
Was there, I don't know if you even remember this, but in January, you had kind of I think you compared Greg Jennings to Skip Bayless and called him you called Greg a hot take artist, and then said, like, what are you, Skip Bayless? Did you hear from anybody at Fox Sports about that? Like, was there like a don't mention Skip's name or anything?
Not at all. Not at all. Everyone really gets along. I know that may not feed the narrative that you guys want or have, but everybody gets along.
Yeah, no, I think I'm curious. Obviously, Skip has he almost has like a bit of a Mike Francesa perception to him, just in terms of the arrogance and the competitiveness. So I'm curious how he's perceived inside the building.
You have to view what we all do through the right prism. And that is, we're performers. We're entertainers. We have a job every day. Put out compelling content that an audience wants to digest and see or hear again tomorrow. And that's what we all do. And people reacting to it ultimately, is good for business, because you've put something compelling out there for them to react to. And Skip's as good as that as anyone who's ever done it. Colin Cowherd, as good as anyone who's ever done it. I'd like to think I'm pretty good at it. And I don't think Fox or any of the networks, hires people that they don't believe are really good communicators and put out compelling content. And there's only a couple of these jobs that exist in the world. And they usually try to find talent that has a proven track record of communicating to an audience in a compelling manner. And that's what Fox has done.
Is it hard to build chemistry on a show with a rotating cast of guest hosts? You did it for the last year. Skip is now going to be doing it this year with Shannon gone. Is that something that's difficult, as opposed to just having one person to work with every single day?
Well, it's always easier to have one person, obviously. But it's not like I'm playing with a pool of 90 guys. It's still a limited amount of guys. I know most of them personally. So while you may not know the intricacies of everyone's, personality, you find out very quickly. And I've been blessed to have the guys, that they've put around me for the last year, and moving forward, more of that. So that's been easy.
I think you previously, I think you mentioned this even on your FAN show. You talked about it, that you were offered the opportunity to replace Howard Stern on terrestrial radio.
Wow, it's a long time ago. Yeah.
So that was when he went to Sirius in 2005. When he announced he was going to satellite, which I think he announced it in 2004, and then he actually went the January of 2006 or 2005. But that job, ultimately, the terrestrial job, went to David Lee Roth. How close was that to happening with you taking over Stern's terrestrial radio affiliates?
It was almost a done deal. It got stopped because I was working at a radio station in New Jersey, and it was kind of a mom and pop ownership group at the time. And they kind of put up a roadblock. I had a contract, obviously. I'd gotten permission to talk to CBS or Infinity at the time about the job. And then at the 11th hour, when the job was being offered to me, they let me and Joel Hollander, who ran Radio New York at that time, they let us both know that they really weren't going to let me out of my contract. So it went downhill very, very quickly. I remember driving home and calling my wife saying, we're moving to New York. I'm replacing Howard Stern. And 10 minutes later, getting a phone call, your company's not letting you out of your contract. So that was, it was that. Then I was offered the opportunity, for Free FM in New York when they made that flip post Stern, and really got very, very lucky that Chris Olivero was the architect running things in 2007 and considered me a viable candidate to replace Imus. But yeah, we're looking back, I had a shot for a minute to replace Howard Stern.
How was it then having to continue working for a company that didn't let you out of your contract to do something that you wanted to do? Was there animosity there?
Oh yeah, I was livid with them.
Yeah.
I was livid with New Jersey 101.5. It's the station I'm talking about. And for a long time, wouldn't talk, to the general manager, the program director, because I felt like in our business, I'm doing afternoons in New Jersey. And here I have this great opportunity to do mornings in New York City. Normally, you don't stand in the way of that kind of progress. You do what I think is the right thing, and you shake the man's hand and wish him well and let him go on his journey for this life-changing opportunity. And they chose not to do that. So at the time, I had great resentment towards them for not letting me go.
Were you, I don't know if the deal got this far in discussions, but were you going to only be on K-Rock, or were affiliates around the country going to have the opportunity to pick you up if they wanted?
There were talks of 3 or 4 of the East Coast stations. It was never going to be every one of the affiliates. It was going to be potentially, and we never got that far, but Philly was on the table. New York, of course, was on the table. West Palm Beach was on the table. And if memory serves, maybe Boston. And then ultimately, and you could check this, I think the Kid Chris got those stations. Adam Carolla got the West Coast stations. And they hired Rover out of Cleveland for some of the Midwest stations.
Yeah.
But I was never going to do any of those. It was only going to be East Coast.
Would replacing Stern have felt like a harder challenge than replacing Imus?
Only looking back on it.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, you bet your ass I want to replace Howard Stern. First off, he's my radio idol, right? He's the guy, right? He's the Mount Rushmore guy. He's who I love listening to growing up, and obviously have patterned a lot of my broadcast career over a lot of his sensibilities as a performer, as a kid growing up in New York in the late 70s, obviously. But in reality, that show, even if successful, would have failed. What I mean by that is, if Howard's getting 20 shares and I come in with an 8 share and it's great, I lost more than half his audience.
Right.
So I think, again, only now with clarity, looking backwards on it, replacing Imus was actually a much better job, not only because the chance for true success was more real, but WFAN, as we've now seen, a much healthier radio station than K-Rock was. 92.3's gone through how many transformations since Howard left for Sirius. So again, in the moment, devastated. I didn't get the job. But in reality, replacing Imus was a much easier putt than replacing Howard Stern.
Was Mark Chernoff involved? Because I know he was involved in potentially bringing you to replace Stern.
No. The Stern was
because he was
than Mark.
I think he was all right because
the fan at that time,
and I thought he was also involved in developing Free FM.
He had a finger on it for sure, and we met more about Free FM than about Stern.
Okay.
So he wasn't. I don't think he was more focused on sports programming for the company. So I did not meet Mark for that. I did talk to Mark about Free FM. And ultimately, obviously, going to the fan. We had a secret meeting at Harold's Deli in Edison, New Jersey, to go over the deal.
With Mike?
No, not with Mike, with Mark Chernoff.
No, but when was there also a secret meeting? Then there was also another meeting with Mike at one point.
Yeah, so once I had the job, we met. It was me, Mark Chernoff, and Mike Francesa at the Cup Diner in Astoria in Queens. And it's raining outside. And Mike comes in with sunglasses on and didn't take them off. And he wouldn't even look in my direction. And Mark's talking about how Boomer and Carton are going to be great, this and that. Hadn't done a show yet. And I'll never forget, Mike says it's going to fail miserably. No one's going to be able to work with Boomer. He's a former quarterback. He's an egomaniac. It's not going to work. Of course, he reiterated that he could make it work, but only he could make it work. And I remember before he left the lunch, he said, look, if Cherney says you're the guy, then I guess you're the guy, but it ain't going to work. And that was it.
Was Chris Russo just as supportive of you being hired and paired with Boomer?
Chris Russo famously asked me in the hallway a couple months into my tenure there if I like sports. We were in a little hallway in between my office and Chernoff's office. And whatever bit we had done that day was not sports related. And he comes up to me and says, "Do you even like sports?" And we have that clip that became a famous clip.
And what's interesting also is the fact that as much as you were always kind of criticized by some people that you didn't do enough sports on FAN, you did a lot more sports than Imus did.
Yeah, the funny thing is that if you actually went back and I'm not going to either, Boomer and Carton and Roberts was still 85% sports talk.
Right.
It just wasn't kind of boring X's and O's sports talk, but almost everything was centered around sports in some capacity. And I always found it interesting that and it was a criticism, I suppose, or those guys don't talk sports. Like, it's really, I wouldn't say all we did, but we did 85, 90% sports talk. I just think we did it in a way that, at least on WFAN, it had never been done before. FAN historically was always straightforward. The 3-4 defense doesn't work. This quarterback, whatever it was. And I think we just presented it in a much more unique manner. So people just had a tough time, I think, figuring that out.
How many more years do you think Boomer Esiason has on WFAN?
He doesn't like me talking about that.
Well, last year you had predicted that this was going to be his last year.
Look, I think that show's doing great, obviously. He can take 9 weeks off a year as he does. So I think as long as his family's well and his grandkids are on the East Coast, which they are, I think Boomer's going to be there for a while. I don't think he's hanging them up anytime soon.
Have you hosted your last weekday drive time show on FAN?
You mean full-time like my job? Or am I going to fill in?
Are you going to fill in?
I don't know. Look, if FAN ever called me, obviously I would always say yes to the phone call, to not to help out. That seems a little disrespectful, but look, I'm still very close with everyone at FAN. As I've said many times, it holds a very special place in my heart. I will never close that door. They allow me to continue my public service show on Saturdays. Hello, my name is Craig, for, gambling addiction and addicts like myself. So I'd never say no, but I love FAN. I always have, I always will.
How important is that that Saturday show to you and its messaging? Yeah,
it's really important on a personal level. Obviously I don't get paid to do it. I don't want to get paid to do it. I do it because, I'm blessed to be alive, because, that may not have been the case going back a number of years. And I'm blessed to have this platform, not just to do what I do as an entertainer and performer, but, I made a pledge. I went to rehab out in Prescott, Arizona, and I've told this story before, so I appreciate you just allowing me to say it again.
Yeah.
And I'm in rehab with about a dozen other men and women from all across the country. And very quickly, they figure out, what I did for a living. And before I left the rehab, we had what amounts to a family dinner. And at this dinner, the collective group of fellow addicts said, listen, there isn't a face of gambling addiction, right? And it's kind of like an invisible, silent addiction in that there's no blood test for it, no urine test. If I lined 10 people against the wall and told you 3 of them are compulsive gamblers, you can't tell me which 3 they are. And they asked me if I'd make them a promise, and that is, if I ever got back on TV or radio, use that platform, for good, to share my story and the stories of other addicts, so we could start to humanize gambling addiction. And I made them a pledge that I would. And WFAN has allowed me to do that. And for all the great career success that I've been really fortunate to have, and all the great people I've been really fortunate to work with and for, Hello, my name is Craig is the single most important broadcast I've ever done. And both Fox and FAN acknowledge that and are collectively allowing me to continue it. And it's really important that I do it.
When is the last time that you made any sort of bet?
5 years plus. So the end of June back in 2018 is the last wager I made. And I remember it not just because it's the last one, but embarrassingly, it was after rehab. And because, part of being a gambling addict is an out of control ego about my ability to wager and play blackjack specifically, I went to a casino in Pennsylvania and I had $60,000 in cash. I took 30 grand in the casino with me and purposely left 30 grand in my car in the parking lot. And I want to prove to myself that if I lost the 30 grand I went in with, I wasn't going to go get the other 30 grand and gamble. And up and down, up and down. And then I'm playing two hands at once. And I've got two splits and a double. And I don't have enough money to play it. And because, I don't know, I guess my addiction was so out of control, I wasn't willing to misplay the hand. In other words, I'm going to get the money because I have to double this hand because I got to play the game right. And I went and got the other 30 grand and lost it. And that's the last time I ever made a wager.
Does, obviously you're dealing with your own addiction yourself. Does attempting to become the face of that sports, the gambling addiction, and working with FanDuel, does it put added pressure on you? Like, is that almost make dealing with your personal addiction harder?
No, for me, and I wish I could explain why. I can't explain why. Like, I don't know why I stopped. So let me start with that. I just don't know. I think it's the last part of my, journey of recovery is to try to figure out, with the proper therapists and professionals, which I'm not, obviously. I don't know why I stopped. I don't. I gambled every day pretty much, over about a 2-year period uncontrollably, obscene amounts of money, et cetera, all well documented. We don't need to go over it again. And then one day when I failed that personal test, I just stopped. And I'm not sure if I wish I could tell you why. I can't. It's like a great mystery to me for someone who was so like in the deep end with it to then just cold turkey stop.
Right.
I don't know why my brain or my body allowed me to do that. The partnership with FanDuel and obviously being surrounded by gambling everywhere you go now, which is impossible not to be, for me works. It's kind of counterintuitive. It's a daily reminder of being in prison, a daily reminder of throwing everything I worked for out the window, and a daily reminder of who I don't ever want to be again. And I think that's very valuable.
You're about 2 weeks away from the 6-year anniversary of your arrest. Is that a difficult day? Do you reflect at all, or you just kind of try to go about your day as normal?
Yeah, it only came up. It's funny you asked that. So September 6th is Chris Christie's birthday. Okay, number one. Number two, the day I got arrested, and in a weird case of irony, it's the day I started the Fox show. And that has kind of turned September 6th into a more positive day. But even prior to doing the Fox show, I'm aware of the date, obviously. Right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't any more difficult than any other day. I'm a gambling addict. Gambling cost me everything I had in life. Bad decisions and all the things that, I did all stems from gambling. Not that gambling's illegal. It's not, but it all led to other, bad decisions. So whether it's September 6th or January 4th, I know who I am and I own it. And for anyone out there that has a problem with who I am, that's your problem. I know who I am. I'm a compulsive gambler. It costs me everything. And I'm blessed to have this great opportunity to rebuild my life personally and professionally. And I do not take that for granted.
Craig, you were great. Good luck with year 2 of the Carton Show. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And thanks for all the mentions of awful announcing when you were on WFAN. I really appreciate it.
Look, you've been very positive and good in your coverage of me, and I appreciate that. And we do go back a long, long time ago. And I'm glad that you're doing well, and I'm glad that you seem to be in a good place, and, your writing's not bad.
Thanks. That is Craig Carton. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thank you for listening, and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.